ISIS, of course, but just want to get your reaction to this story about cell phone calls being intercepted all around Washington, D.C. What's your take on that?
Well, my take is that every time you speak on your cell phone, assume someone's listening in. That's what I always do. It doesn't really surprise me, and it doesn't really surprise me that it's in Washington, and I think it's probably way beyond Washington as well.
All right, well, let me move on to ISIS then, what we really brought you in to talk about today. You've been calling for these Syrian rebels to be armed for 2 years now. What do you make of all the skepticism about the strategy? Is it warranted? Is it fair?
Well, it's always fair to second guess and when you're voting on these important issues. But, you know, you could take anything, any decision, and nitpick it to death and say, well, what about this and what about that, and who do we know who these rebels are, and you can just go on and on. I mean, we have only bad choices left in Syria and in Iraq.
Well, let's focus
the worst choice, I think, is to do nothing. I think the president and the Congress is attempting to do something. I think it's the best course of action for now.
So let's focus on some of those bad choices as you describe it, including the process of trying to, vet these Syrian moderates. How do you do that, and how do you make sure that those that you are vetting don't ultimately take this weaponry and use it against us in some form?
Well, you can't. Obviously, you cannot 100% make sure that that doesn't happen. You try. I'm not an expert on the entire vetting process, but obviously you can try to figure out where these people have been and what their loyalties are. I think it was a mistake 2 years ago not to arm and train the Free Syria Army. You know, when the civil war started in Syria, that was the first Arab Spring. I mean, Assad has been brutal. He's murdered his own people. These were people that wanted democracy, and they died on the vine. They weathered on the vine because they needed the arms. We didn't provide it, and ISIS moved into the void. So now we have a chance. People say they don't want American boots on the ground. Neither do I. But in Iraq, we have the Kurds on the ground to be our boots, and the Iraqis. We need people in Syria, and that's where these well-vetted rebels would come in. They'd be our boots on the ground there.
And Congressman, just very briefly, ISIS is already calling for attacks on members of this coalition. I want to get a sense from you right now if you feel certain that none of these partners, including Arab ones, are going to back out. How confident are you in the support that the U.S. has from these allies that are supposed to be doing the fighting on our behalf?
Well, I've said it, and others have said it. It's absolutely important that the Arabs, the Arab nations, are part of this.
Do you have faith in them, though?
Well, I think we have no choice. As I said, there are only bad choices left. The worst choice is to do nothing and allow ISIL to get stronger. I guarantee if we do nothing, there'll be attacks on the U.S. homeland. There'll be attacks on our allies, both in Europe and the Arab world. We cannot afford to sit back and do nothing. We did that once before in Afghanistan when the Russians were thrown out. We allowed the Taliban to allow Al-Qaeda in, and the result was September 11th, 2001. They had a no man's land where they could train, and that's the same thing happening now with ISIL in Syria and in Iraq. We just cannot sit still and allow them to get stronger and wait until they attack our homeland.
Sure. Congressman Engel in New York with us today. Congressman, thanks for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you.